Almost no one is the villain of their own story. In fact, most of us will go through incredible lengths, often subconsciously, to avoid seeing ourselves as the bad guy. This is true for pretty much all of us, but it is especially true for people who are struggling with addictions. Today, we're going to be delving into how shame operates just below the surface to fuel addiction through justification, rationalization, and blame. You might be surprised to know that most of us aren't even aware of when we're experiencing shame. We almost all know what shame is, and we can think of some examples that provoke that feeling inside of us. For the most part, you probably don't even realize when you're carrying it around. And we're especially unaware of how it's triggering our decisions, our emotions, how we think and view the world, and how we're acting in ways to avoid the feeling altogether. So let's take a look at the psychological defense mechanisms that keep this shame hovering below the surface and below our awareness. For those of you who are new here, welcome to Put the Shovel Down. This YouTube channel is designed to make sure that you stay 5 steps ahead of addiction, because that's pretty much the only way to beat addiction. You have to know exactly what you're dealing with so that you know not just what's happening today or tomorrow, but what's coming down the line. You can only beat addiction through strategy, whether that's for yourself battling an addiction or trying to help and support a loved one battling addiction. And today's topic is going to help you do just that. If something's controlling your behavior and your thought processes and you're not aware of it, then you definitely can't get ahead of it. But once you can become self-aware and identify what's happening and why it's happening, that's how you're going to get control over the situation so that you can make better, more effective, more strategic decisions. So we're going to be covering the top 4 psychological defense mechanisms that people struggling with an addiction use to stay in denial about the addiction, which then in turn fuels the addiction to last that much longer. The first one we're going to talk about is justification. Now, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. It's when we convince ourselves that our actions were unavoidable or at least necessary. Let's say, for example, I have an addiction to pain pills. When you're dependent on pain pills, you need them to be able to get up and function. Otherwise, you're going to be deathly sick, which means if you're going to get up and go to work, you are going to have to find some pain pills in order to be able to function appropriately enough to go to work and get your job done. So one way I might justify continued use is if I don't continue to use, I won't be able to show up at work. I won't be able to support my family. I'm going to lose my job. I have to do this. I'm stuck. I can't take 30, 60, or 90 days off to go to treatment. This is an example of justification. And you see, it's tricky because there's some truth in that. A lot of truth in that. In fact, everything I just said is probably the truth. It's just not the whole truth. You see, there's more to the picture. If we keep going with the example of needing to take pain pills to go to work, and we stretch that out longer and we look at the long haul in this story, what you're going to see is that the unmanageability in someone with this addiction is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger until it eventually gets to the point where a person can't maintain the addiction enough to consistently show up to work regularly, which means they're probably going to lose their job. Or maybe they get drug tested and they're going to lose their job, or the unmanageability in their life is going to creep into their work. Like, say, for example, they need to meet someone to get more of these pain pills on their lunch break. And as is often the case, you end up spending hours and hours sitting in a parking lot waiting for your hookup to come and bring you what you need, ultimately losing hours at work, putting your job in jeopardy. There are so many ways that this addiction is going to continue to put your job in jeopardy, and eventually that very thing that you're trying to avoid is going to happen. And then there's rationalization. This is when we make our behaviors, our decisions seem less bad than they really are. For example, you might find yourself telling yourself, well, at least I'm not doing hard drugs, or at least I'm not stealing, or at least I'm not beating my wife. There's always something that we can compare ourselves against that's worse off than what's going on in our life, which then helps us to feel less bad about the situation that we're in. Rationalization works very similarly to minimization. But in minimization, it's a way of downplaying how our behavior impacts other people. A very common thing that people with addictions tell themselves is, I'm only hurting myself, which definitely isn't the case, even if no one around you is aware of what you're doing. And that's because the unmanageability as an addiction grows gets bigger and bigger and bigger, starts to take on more and more of your life. In the beginning, we can kind of manage this secret addictive life, and keep our outside external life going. But as that addiction grows and grows, it takes up more of our time, our energy, our mental space, our resources, everything. And we become so involved with that, our attention span and ability to be present for anything else gets smaller and smaller and smaller as the addiction grows. That includes being present for your kids, being present for your job, being emotionally engaged in your relationships, having desire or interest in hobbies or outside activities. All of that diminishes over the course of time. And eventually, everything in your life ends up revolving around maintaining your addiction. And ultimately, all of your other responsibilities and relationships will suffer. It's just the nature of the problem. Now, another way that we avoid the shame of addiction is to place blame elsewhere. Like, let's say, for example, that you are in marketing or sales or you're in business of some sort. And part of your job is to go out and entertain customers. And for a lot of years, maybe that has involved drinking with people. It can definitely make you feel like that is part of your job requirement. And it's easy to convince yourself that you're trapped with no other options. Or maybe you just straight up blame someone else. Like, if my wife wasn't so controlling, maybe I wouldn't need to drink. That blame can go towards a certain situation, a certain person, or even bigger entities like the government or society or culture. The more we rationalize, justify, minimize, and blame, the more we stay stuck. It's these psychological defense mechanisms, which are meant to protect us emotionally, that end up keeping us stuck in denial. It keeps us focusing on all the wrong things, unable to see the truth of what's really happening. Addiction thrives in darkness, which means the best way to beat it is to shine a light on it. It pretty much won't survive in the light. So if we can get really honest with ourselves, take a look at how we're rationalizing, justifying, minimizing, blaming, how we're staying in denial. And what's really going on there is we're trying to protect ourselves from something that makes us feel really uncomfortable about ourselves. When we can take a look at that in the light and be really honest with ourselves, we will no longer have the need for these protective defense mechanisms. And we can start letting those go, which means we can let them go. We can look at the truth. We can get really honest with ourselves, which of course is the first most primary important requirement for recovery: self-honesty. When we think about addiction, we realize that lying comes along with it. But we mostly think about how people with addictions lie to other people. A lot of times what we forget to take into account is how much we lie to ourselves. It's the lying to ourselves that's causing the big problem here. And yes, it can be uncomfortable to start peeling back these layers, but ultimately that's what's needed to set you free. The more we engage in addictive behavior, the more shameful we feel, which means the more defense mechanisms come on board. I've been doing this work for more than 20 years now, and I am still continuously amazed about the depth of denial. No matter how many times I see it, it is still shocking to listen to someone tell me their story that seems so obvious from the outside what's going on, and then to realize that they really and truly can't see the truth. Now, I realize that many of you watching this video are watching because someone in your life has an addiction. Maybe it's not you, maybe it's someone else. I want you to really take in what I'm saying here, because I know it's our instinct when we have someone in our life who's in denial about something to want to sort of rip the blinders off, to make them see it faster. And often that includes saying and doing things. We're not purposely trying to hit their shame button, but ultimately we are. We're trying to get them to see how they're ruining our life, how they're ruining their life, how they're ruining their child's life, how they're putting themselves and other people in unsafe situations. And the more we try to go at forcing someone to see the truth by hitting their shame button, you can start to see, if you really understand this concept, how that's probably the worst way to get someone out of denial. Getting someone out of denial is all about helping someone feel safe, heard, and understood. Because when someone feels safe, heard, and understood, it's like they're safe enough to start looking at the truth. So while our instinct says throw it in their face as hard and fast as possible, I want your judgment to kick in there and realize that that's probably not a very productive way to go about it. If you want to learn more about getting someone out of denial, I want you to watch this video next because it addresses that specific topic. If you're not subscribed to this channel and you want to learn more about these things, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell notification. That way you'll get notified every time we release new videos. And don't forget, we go live every Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Hopefully, I'll see you there.